So this is a review for Porky's Hired Hand, released in 1940. It's the 308th in the series, and it's directed by Freleng. You can find this on the Porky Pig 101 DVD set, although it's not restored there. A restoration has been lurking around, and hopefully one day it'll make its way onto physical media. It is under copyright. I can't show you the full thing here on YouTube, otherwise the video will just get blocked. But in case you haven't seen this one, Porky has a chicken ranch and is in need for someone to watch over the chickens, so he is sent over from an employment agency, Gregory Grunt. But he isn't exactly too bright, especially once we see the fox enter the picture. Now, in terms of trivia, probably one of the more interesting things is in relation to this fox character, and this is one bit of trivia I honestly didn't know. So my good friend Camden Spees, who is a comic expert, especially of that time period, he sent me an audio recording in relation to this fox and how the character was then used within Dell Comics. It's not as though he became a massive breakout character or anything, but it's interesting when these minor characters, they might appear in one short, but then they'll take another life of their own in the comic books. Another good example is one of the characters that's usually in Henry Hawk comics, Oliver Owl, who only appeared in like 2 or 3 shorts a few years prior to this one. So I'll let Camden explain about the comic book origins of this fox character.
Hello, I'm back once again to talk about comics. But before I begin, I want to thank blogger Tamayim, whose name I'm botching, in his comment section for their research on this subject. Some of his criticisms I disagree with, but nevertheless, here I am to talk about Porky's Hired Hand, and in particular, the fox that's starring in this cartoon. By the way, this fox's name is Freddy. Contrary to popular belief, always done it without any notions or research about these comics. The Looney Tunes and Rare Melodies comics didn't make up new characters. In fact, every character during their debut issues appeared at some point between the 1938 and 1941 period of the shorts. Some appeared a little bit earlier too, like Mary Jane, but most of them appeared between that period. Some of them may only have appeared once, some maybe even for a brief moment in the cartoons. But they all did make an appearance. There is one text story that Dell creatives, by the way, mistake the fox's name as well, and they called him Freleng. Why, I'm not sure. The comics rarely adapted cartoons directly, but the first issue had several adaptations done directly. A Wild Hare and Tom Thumb in Trouble were the other two. Porky's Hired Hand was also adapted. The first issue went so far as to include Freddy Fox as a mainstay on the inside back cover, and the fox would launch into a short series in issue 8 with an already established character named Ringy Runga. Where does Ringy Runga come from? I honestly don't know. If you know, and if you think you can assume if there's a character that appears like this between the 38 to 41 or before a period, contact me, by the way. Now, who wrote these comics? Gaylord Du Bois wrote them, and he was likely the writer of all of them, but in Du Bois, along with Carl Barks, John Stanley, Walt Kelly, arguably make up the Mount Rushmore of Dell Comics talent that inspired the most artists. Du Bois was the resident adventure strip guy over at Dell Comics, creating a lot of the Tarzan stories and many other things. He also wrote a lot of funny animal comics. And for Looney Tunes comics, he also wrote Pat, Patsy, and Pete, which was a series that didn't come to the Looney Tunes canon, but was a series created for the comics directly by Walt Kelly, who later would create Pogo. Freddy and Ringy Runga were dropped after issue 20.
Thank you, Camden. So there's not really too much else by way of trivia, but there are a few bits and pieces that I'll point out as we go through the short. But what's interesting about this one that you'll notice as we go through it is that Freleng takes the Bob Clampett approach when it comes to Porky Pig, where you see him in the beginning, Friz is interested in these other characters, and then you see Porky Pig at the end. Earlier in 1940, Freleng directed You Ought to Be in Pictures, which is one of the greatest Porky Pig shorts ever made, and one of the best Looney Tunes shorts ever made, period, of course. So it's interesting to see that even Freleng sort of lost interest in Porky Pig not long after that, but still, at least there's a lot to like about this one, especially this fox character, and it's also interesting to see the way Freleng actually directs it. So let's take a look at this one from start to finish. So we start off right away with an employment letter. Now there is a reference here to Alvarado. Now, my initial thought is that it's a reference to Pete Alvarado, who was an animator and a comic book artist, but around this time he did some work on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He left Disney in 1939, and he actually did some comic work and then returned to Disney Studio in 1941. So I don't know if this is a reference to him or if it's a reference to another person with the name Alvarado. Maybe Peter Alvarado was somebody's friend at the studio. Who knows? If you have any information in relation to Pete Alvarado's time around 1940, whether he made a bit of a pit stop or whatever at Warner Brothers, definitely let me know. I like how the address, and I get it, this is just a simplified thing just for the purposes of the story. I get it, but I still find it amusing that it's just Porky Pig, care of Porky's Chicken Ranch. Like, there's no address, it's just that. Everyone seems to know what this ranch actually is. And we're going to soon meet Gregory Grunt. I wonder who came up with that name. And as we'll see throughout the short, this employment agency, Cornstalk Employment Agency, haha, they perhaps don't vet their potential employees particularly well, as we'll see in the rest of the short. And normally when you see this sort of thing, it will be left up to the audience to read the actual letter, but no, Porky actually narrates it, which is pretty nice of him. But I do like the cut where we actually finally see this particular pig, who's got a very interesting design. I don't know, there's something about a pig character, but being really tall like this one. And of course, he's got that ridiculous laugh. And while this fact should be obvious, I still want to point it out that all the 3 characters in this short are voiced by Blanc. There's no other voices here. But we go back to the letter where it says, P.S. Alright, so he ain't neat.
P.S. Alright, so he ain't neat.
Yeah, you got that right. But we cut to the next shot, and it especially pops in this restoration. So, of course, we've got the painted backgrounds. I like how the chickens are loosely drawn the way they are. There's just something about it that looks really nice. But I like the fact that we got the cell shading there. We got the 2 different colors. I know it's black and white, but I'm sure you get what I mean. But here's a great way to do exposition. Just have Porky ask Gregory, okay, so what exactly are you here to do? And in Mel Blanc's really funny, dopey voice, which I absolutely adore, he goes through his actual job for the night and setting up the entire plot, because the important point that he actually forgets, that Porky reminds him of, is to not go to sleep.
Now, what did I tell you to do?
You said, keep your eyes open and watch out for that fox. He's been getting too many of my chickens lately. He's a sly devil, he is, and
don't go to sleep.
Don't go to sleep.
But we all know what's going to happen, right? In that brief shot of Porky leaving the barn, I like the way the light is played on it. So as he leaves, you see one side of the barn lit up, and then you see the other side of the barn lit up as he's walking away. Now, I just like the look of that, especially in these black and white shorts. But as he's walking away, we, of course, hear Gregory saying,
You can depend on me.
And we cut straight to him sleeping. That's just one of the funniest cutaway things I've ever seen. So I guess he's not a particularly good watchman. But once again, I'm just looking at the design of Gregory. It's such a bizarre design. I just love it. And they're all snore in harmony the way they do. Which is something I typically would see in a Three Stooges short, so maybe the writer of this short likes the Three Stooges, I don't know. Although that bit definitely takes a little bit too long. They didn't have to do it so many times, but the next shot is great. In fact, by looking at this shot, you would think that Frank Tashlin had directed this short. He was either between Disney or Screen Gems around this time, but what a great shot. You see the silhouette of this fox approaching the hen house with his bag, ready to get his next meal. And naturally, it's beautifully timed to the music, as only Friz Freleng would do, tiptoeing to the actual beat. And the fox naturally introduces himself, saying, yeah, I'm the little fox that they can't catch. But this design of the fox definitely reminds me of the fox in Pinocchio. Now, I'm not saying that the design was lifted or anything, but it's just such a bizarre similarity between the 2 characters there. And so the fox enters through the window and ends up even slipping and falling on Gregory. Such a great way to show that Gregory is even more inept than we actually thought. Just the timing of the way that the fox ends up slipping on top of him is just great. And now we see the fox is kind of like he's at the shops where you're sort of trying to pick the best vegetable to actually put in the bag, and he ends up getting 2, but then he sees the 3rd one, and I just like how casually he just tosses it away, as though he's not going to just wake up and sound the alarm. But if you listen closely, my good friend Manny Cruz, the junior tenor, pointed this out, but this is one of those cues that Carl Starling liked to use, that it's his own original cue. It's not quite the Carl Starling cue in G, it's a very similar variant, and he also used that in Porky's baseball broadcast. But it's interesting that in 1940, he used this particular cue or the other variation of the cue in quite a few of the shorts, but then just stopped doing it after a while. So it's kind of interesting that he just decided to do that. And one of the chickens ends up sleepwalking in a way that looks a bit ridiculous. But regardless, it's beautifully timed, and the fox, of course, sees its chance and ends up bagging that one as well. So far, the gags aren't exactly ha-ha crazy funny or anything, but still has its own charm, especially with how the short looks. And I noted before in the earlier scene how you had the dual tones on the characters, but this entire scene taking place at night, you got a lot of the dual tones on the bags and on the poles and all over this particular chicken coop. And this restoration really just shows all that off and just the artistry involved. So the fox ends up seeing a whole bunch of chicks on a pole and just puts it in the bag, and it seems like he's just about done. But not before he gets the last one. But I have to say, the next shot definitely got me. We see the wolf being shocked, and who's awake? It's Gregory. That look that he gives the fox, that just kills me every time. Where he's just standing there, just not particularly happy, so maybe he's not as inept as we thought. So Gregory rightfully tells him to put everything back, and he's actually proud of himself in telling the fox what to do.
Oh, no you don't. I saw you. Put 'em back where you got 'em. That's telling him. Come on, put 'em back.
The fox's face, though, just how sad he ends up looking, is like, oh, I guess I gotta put him back. And the voice is definitely similar to the Bugs Bunny voice that Mel Blanc would do. Of course, it's not quite Bugs Bunny, but it's still in the same kind of vein where Mel Blanc, around this time, he would do similar characters with the voice that he would end up using on Bugs Bunny all the time. So you got this fox, and then in Fox and Hounds, he would do a similar thing. In fact, the fox has another similarity with Bugs Bunny, or at least what the character will end up becoming, and that is the whole psychological manipulation where he says, oh, we could have made a nice profit. What do you mean, we?
Well, okay. Too bad, too bad. Nice bunch of chickens here. We could have made a nice little profit there.
What do you mean, we?
But the fox hints about making money, and Gregory said, hang on a moment, what about Porky? But then we see a weird cutaway, so it turns to black for a brief moment, and then he comes back to the next scene.
I was just looking for a smart, honest, wide-awake young man. About your type that would make a good partner. But I guess you're not interested in making money.
Now, wait a minute, Mr. Fox. I didn't say I wasn't interested. But what about Porky?
Why, Porky would be the first to want to see you get ahead.
I wonder if that's just something that was present in the actual print, or if there was a cut bit in there, I don't know. But of course, what do we hear in the background? After hearing an original cue by Carl Starling, we do briefly hear We're in the Money. But in any case, you got the fox being quite manipulative, and it's got Gregory along for the ride as to their future profit-making endeavor, whatever that is. I just like how the fox keeps it so vague, as though Gregory's going to make all this money, but from what?
Can't you just see the sign in bright lights above our door? Fox and, hey, what'd you say your name was? Oh, yeah, Gregory. Fox and Gregory.
How about, Gregory and Fox, huh?
Okay, Gregory and Fox, it's a deal.
It's so ridiculous that he even gives Gregory the bag, and Gregory's even helping him now. And yet he was just so damn vague about the whole profit-making idea. Now, the next bit is an interesting twist, because I guess the writers had to figure out, okay, does the fox get away with it, or what does Gregory do, and so on. No, instead of going through the exit, the fox ends up going into the incubator room. And if you know what an incubator room is, well, they can get pretty hot.
I guess that's everything. Let's go. Hey, Gregory, pick up a couple of sacks of that feed. Chickens gotta eat, you know.
But one thing I just wanted to point out, when the fox says to Gregory to make sure he picks up the feed, that face of Gregory in that one very brief shot just kills me. Again, the design is crazy, but then you got different animators doing their interpretation of the design, and that one's probably the weirdest one of all. But the fox gets into the incubator room and even swallows the key. Sure, okay, because that's what people normally do.
What a sucker! trust your own brother nowadays.
And then he realizes, whoops, I've entered in the wrong room and I'm now stuck in the incubator room. Now, we all know how great Mel Blanc is, but his dramatic readings and scenes like this always kill me. And the animation here is great when he's knocking against the door. I believe that's Dick Bickenbach. If I'm wrong about that, definitely let me know.
It can't be. Trapped. I gotta get out of here. I'll fry. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. Let me out.
I like the fact that he's saying, help, let me out, and Gregory, who still thinks the fox is his partner and still doesn't realize he's going to be swindled, he says, I'll help you, partner. And naturally, Gregory tries to use his head to solve the problem. Literally.
Get me out! Get me out! A croak! It's curtains! Water! Water!
Then we continue Mel Blanc's wonderful vocal performance, and in a great bit of layout, he looks over, he sees for fire only, and assumes that there's water in that bucket. But no, he starts drinking what's in the bucket and ends up that it's actually sand. Again, such a great bit of layout there to tell a wonderful joke. And even the delivery of sand. Who put that there? Such a great delivery.
Sand! Who put that there?
We look on over to the eggs, and I like the fact that one of the eggs ends up hatching, and then you got the fox pleading for help against this chick who's literally just born, and the chick's just looking all on confused, wondering, who is this person asking me for help? So Gregory tries again to break in, after saying keep cool, ha ha, and ends up trying to use his head again, to no avail, and look who is back. Porky. Yeah, it's your short, Porky. So he breaks in with a shotgun, wondering what all the commotion is, so I guess the noise must have been really loud because this is all the way out in the chicken coop, so I guess his farmhouse must be really close. But anyway, so Gregory confirms that, hey, the fox is in that door. Porky thinks, oh, you've actually done your job. Hold the gun, I'll let him out, and let's get rid of that fox.
I'll open the door. You get him when he comes out. Ready? Okay.
And we end in one of the weirdest endings possible. So we see that the fox has shrunk because of all that steam and says, you'll hear from my lawyer, and we end right there. So this one's an interesting one. I do like the character of Gregory, although objectively, there's not really much to him. He's just a dumb character and he just happens to be a really tall pig. But I don't know, I just like the design. I love the vocal delivery by Mel Blanc, and for a first appearance, and last appearance of course, it's fine for what it is. It serves its purpose well. And then even this fox character, which is, again, it's kind of like a Bugs Bunny type character, with Bugs being in his first short not long ago, but given that all these things were in production at roughly the same time, they wouldn't have known how huge Bugs Bunny was going to be. So this fox is more or less like this very similar character. Just one of those coincidences, of course. I guess the weaker point in this one is maybe the story. It's a good idea where Porky needs someone to look after the fox and is incredibly inept, and the fox uses reverse psychology. I think it's really more the third act that didn't really do it for me that much. I do love Mel Blanc's vocal performance at the end, but that whole bit really takes too long, and I did feel that the end punchline wasn't particularly strong. I still think that maybe there should have been something with Gregory still thinking that he's going to be a partner with this fox, that somehow does something to Porky and he escapes with a fox or something along those lines. I think that might have worked better. But in any case, I certainly don't hate this short. I think it's fine, but it is middle of the road, and you can tell that Friz wanted to focus on these other two characters. Maybe have their own series, I don't know. But they certainly had a small little thing in comic books. This one gets 6 out of 10. I can't find myself hating it or anything. I think most of that score really is because, I don't know, there's something about this Gregory character that spoke to me, I guess. But in any case, that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Now look what you've done to me! A fine thing! Just look at me! Just look at me! I'm a rude man! You'll hear from my lawyer about this! That's all, folks.